Hello, I'm Don Shaw. Welcome to episode 18 of Friending the Mirror. I'm an author and professional speaker, and I bring this to you as a service so that we can learn more about types of physical differences that people have. Today's episode is titled Looking Up Life as a Dwarf, and my guest today is Leah Smith. Leah is the Director of Public Relations for Little People of America, or LPA. LPA is dedicated to improving the quality of life for people with dwarfism, celebrating with great pride little people's contributions to social diversity, and bringing solutions and global awareness to prominent issues affecting individuals of short stature and their families. Leah has been active in LPA her entire life and is grateful for the sense of community the organization has given her. In her voluntary public relations position, Leah responds to media inquiries regarding dwarfism, drafts press releases, and advocates for the media's use of respectful language. Leah is the youngest of three children and is the only little person in her family. She currently resides in Philadelphia with her partner and two dogs. Leah, welcome to Friending the Mirror.
Hi.
And start right off, and I'm going to ask you, what is dwarfism?
So, hello, thank you for having me. Dwarfism is the definition that LPA uses is 4'10" or shorter with a medical diagnosis. So a lot of people are 4'10" or shorter, but they don't have the medical diagnosis of dwarfism. So that's really what differentiates just a short person from a person with dwarfism.
Okay, could you explain a little bit about the medical diagnosis? Is there something specifically medically that they have to find that defines them as a dwarf?
Yeah, so it's usually, there's over 200 different types of dwarfism. And so all of them are different, but they all have characteristics that are common for that type. And so you would need those, but most of them are skeletal orthopedic issues that would define them as that.
Okay, well, that kind of, you said it's there was a lot of skeletal and orthopedic issues. What other type of medical issues are people with dwarfism subject to having?
So again, this is, it's hard to generalize because there are so many different types, but normally it's spinal stenosis, curvature of the legs, sleep apnea. Those are probably some of the most common that medical, but like I said, it varies person by person even.
Okay, so is dwarfism considered a disability?
So we are covered under the ADA. We are protected by the ADA against discrimination. But as far as within the community, it really varies as far as the people identify as having a disability. Most people identify more strongly as just having dwarfism rather than having a disability.
Okay, yeah, I certainly understand about the discrimination aspect because I know that I was able to qualify as disabled in the state of Washington to get a volunteer position. And the criteria that they used was because it is possible that because of my appearance, somebody might discriminate against me, even though I am able-bodied. And I mean, most dwarves are able-bodied, correct?
It all depends. It's, sometimes I wouldn't say most. No, I would say that a lot of us use mobility devices of some kind or another. Our legs are a lot shorter. Every one step an average size person takes, it's 2 to 3 for us. And so, we get tired easier. So we often use mobility devices for not only orthopedic reasons, but also just logical reasons. It makes more sense for us.
And when you say mobility devices, are you talking about like motor scooters and stuff like that?
Scooters, wheelchairs, power wheelchairs, anything like that.
Okay, now I know that you drive, and so I was actually kind of curious about driving. I mean, as since we're on the the subject of mobility, so tell me, what is it like for a short person, a short-statured person, to be able to get behind the wheel of a vehicle and drive?
So I think that's one of the really important reasons for having a community. I remember being 16 and or it was probably more like 14 or 15 when I started realizing that that was something I wanted to do. And I started going to LPA saying, how do you drive? How do you drive? And they make extensions. They're called pedal extensions, and they fit. They screw on to the brake and to the accelerator, and so it just brings the pedals forward. And then that's how we drive.
And then your torso is fairly normal sized,
Average size for me, my type of dwarfism, my torso is average size. Yes.
but that's not necessarily true of all dwarfs.
No.
Okay, and then they would just use some kind of a seat cushion or some kind of a booster to give them the elevation they needed.
Yep. Yeah, you can sit on a cushion or whatever you pillow, whatever you need.
Yeah, that would be funny to see you going down the road. Like, well, the shorter person's doing the driving, but the taller person's just kind of sitting there at the cushion. There you go. The terminology. Now, dwarfism or dwarf, you think of a lot of people think of different when they hear the word dwarf, something else comes to mind, like Snow White or Middle Earth. How do people with dwarfism deal with those kind of stereotypes?
Well, I think that as a organization, we're fighting stereotypes since the birth of our organization, and so as far as certain words, we haven't. Majority people like the term dwarfism or person with dwarfism or whatever. We use dwarf, we use short stature, little person. The term we do not use is midget, and that's unilaterally across the organization. People are very offended by that word.
Could you explain what's wrong? I think a lot of people kind of grew up. I mean, that was the first word that I learned to describe someone with dwarfism. And I would not have known until actually recently that it was wrong. So could you explain why that's an offensive term?
Yeah, absolutely. So that term was coined back in the turn of the 20th century, where there was a lot of circuses and sideshows, and which was a huge employment opportunity for us, and oftentimes the only employment opportunity for us, and that was how they would advertise that we were there. And so as we progressed and as we moved forward, and as bills like the Americans with Disabilities Act passed, we started gaining more rights and more, we started becoming doctors and lawyers and moms and dads and architects and anything in between. And so while we still are in entertainment, we are also everything else. And so we want that language to represent that.
Now, I actually heard that midget was a derivative of the word midge, which is a small flying insect. Had you heard that before? Because that's why I was told it was derogatory.
Right, absolutely. That's another reason, but yeah.
Okay, so can you talk about? I know that one of the options that are given to people with children who are diagnosed with dwarfism is the procedure known as limb lengthening. Could you talk about what that is?
So limb lengthening is where they go in and cut your limbs and slowly pull them apart, allow the limb to grow back, and then cut it again and pull it a little more. And so you gain, from what I understand, you gain up to 10 to 12 inches sometimes.
So they're actually allowing like new bone material to grow in between the break. Is that
Yeah. So they're basically breaking it, allowing it to grow back, breaking it, allowing it to grow back.
that sounds really painful.
From what I understand, it is. I haven't had it done, so I can't speak on it personally.
And that's something that would a choice that would be made when children are little. Do you know the age for that?
I've heard as young as like 8 to 10, and as old as teenage 13 or so. Um, Again, I think it changes doctor by doctor, and since I've never, I haven't personally undergone it, I'm not positive on that.
Do you know, can it be performed on an adult or does it have to be done during physical maturation?
I don't know the answer to that. I've never known an adult to do it, but I don't know why they couldn't. Like, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, it doesn't sound like something I'd want to do, but I do understand that parents make choices for what they believe will be best for their child. So,
Absolutely, I think that's what.
yeah, because I know that LPA does not take an official position on the practice. You
Right.
just make people aware of it.
We just want to be supportive of everyone, and whether you undergo it or not, you still are genetically a little person and still have the likelihoods of experiencing some of the social aspects that we face every day, and we want to be sure that you have a community in which you belong to.
So, speaking of the social aspects, what's it been like for you growing up as a little person? How did it affect how other kids treated you in school, in your relationships as you were growing up, that sort of thing?
This is always a tough question to answer because I've never been anything other than little. So I'm not positive, but I had some bullying as a child, and I experienced some of that. But I have a really great friends and family network, support network. My family was always really good to me about it and always helped support me. But they also found a really great organization for me to be involved with that allowed me to be around other people that we could talk about it openly and talk about ways in which to deal with it.
Yeah, and I think that's so important to have that community. I know when I was growing up, I had no connection with other people that had facial differences. And
Right.
for you to have had LPA for most of your life. Before we move on and talk about LPA more, though, I did want to ask you, you mentioned bullying. How did you deal with the bullying? How did you handle that? What did you do?
The story that I remember best is my there was a kid at school that was bullying me, and I came home and was crying about it. And my mom said, "Well, I want you to go and stand up to him and tell him that this is not okay." And I was really worried that I was going to get in trouble. And there were at my school there were different levels of getting in trouble, and so the first level, if I got in trouble, she was going to take me to dinner, and the second level, she was going to take me to dinner and shopping. And so, unfortunately, I never got sent to either. So I think she still owes me dinner and shopping.
So what did you do? You basically told the kid off? Is that it?
But I let him have it, and he,
Verbally though. I mean, you didn't punch him.
whatever that means to a 7-year-old. But I, asked him to stop teasing me and to be nice. Exactly.
Yeah, like I said, you didn't punch him. So
No, I wish I could have though. All
yeah, it's just leave me alone. You're a bully.
right.
So your support system. I mean, obviously you had a decent support system because your parents took you to LPA. Can you talk about your friends and your family and how they supported you?
Yeah, so I had a really, like I said, I am really lucky to have the mom that I had, and she was really supportive of me and would often talk things through with me and brought me to LPA. And I remember even, some of my first interactions with other little people, I was asking them, how do you deal with this? Or how do you deal with that? Or how do you, what do you do in this situation? Or where do you get your clothes, or whatever the question was. But
Actually, that's a good question. Where do you get your clothes?
so we mostly are able to buy off the rack, and then we have to get them altered.
Yeah, that would make sense, especially with what you were saying, because you have an average size torso.
Right.
It'd be a matter of like with a shirt, it would be getting the sleeves altered.
Exactly, or the legs. And that's for my type of dwarfism specifically.
So what are some of the common assumptions that people make about dwarfs?
I think there's a big one that we're not we belong in entertainment. We don't we're not professionals. We're not educated. We're not. I don't know what they are, but I know that we experience a high level of employment discrimination, and so I know that that's definitely one area that they come out.
Like they think you just can't do the job because you're smaller?
Yeah, I think there's that, but I think there's also the stereotype that comes with it of what we've heard from employers that they've said things like, "We don't want to run a freak show around here."
Oh,
And so, I mean, what does it mean for a company to have a little person working there?
well, to me that means social diversity and workplace diversity.
I personally say if that's how you feel, I didn't need to work there anyway. But it's still, it's still not okay.
No, no, absolutely not. In fact, that's definitely a discrimination point if somebody actually said that to you.
Oh, it wasn't said to me. It's just been. It's kind of one of those community stories that's been said.
So now, obviously, when people say things like that, it can't be good for people's self-esteem. So for people who might have a negative body image because of their proportions, because of their size, what advice do you have for them?
You know, I think that pride takes practice. That's what Laura Hershey said, and I think that that's a really truthful word of advice, and that you got to keep practicing at it, and you have to just keep putting it out there that you do have your body is exactly the way it should be.
But how do you get people to believe it to the point of where they can even start saying that to themselves?
So that's a good question. I think providing yourself with community and seeing other people that being around other people with body positive images, being around other people that look like you, so that you're not constantly around people that don't look like you. Um, and I think just learning that you get the final say on what your body is or is not, and that other people don't get to make that decision for you.
Now, you started with LPA. I mean, your parents took you there relatively young. How old were you when you actually started meeting other little people?
I was about 2.5 or 3.
Okay, and what was that? I mean, obviously you probably don't remember the first time. So I guess for you, it was just kind of normal to go and socialize with little people.
It was. It was. I remember being. I mean, I remember being around little people as far back as I can remember, and I think that's exactly how it should be. It should never be a weird thing or a new thing, or if it is, then make it an unweird thing. But one of my mom's favorite stories is when I was about 3. I attended an event in which I saw an older little person, and I walked up to her and I said, um, "Is that what I'm going to look like as an adult?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay, I think that's pretty good," and moved on. And so I think that's what community is all about.
So did your parents tell you fairly early that, hey kid, you're going to quit growing at some point? I mean, at what age were they pretty open with you from as long as you can remember?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I don't think that it was never a secret by any means, and I don't think that they could have kept it a secret because other people tell you often enough. And so, I think that uh, it was no secret in my mind that I was a little person from day one, and that's been part of my identity, and it's part of who I am. Just as much as I'm a woman, I'm also a little person.
Yeah, it's so true. Other people are so good at reminding us of our differences, even when we're not thinking about them.
Right.
So, yeah, thank you, other people. But it's okay because I don't mind it being different because it sure makes us it's so much easier to stand out.
Yeah, and I feel like it's really been a huge gift for me because it allows me to understand so many other different types of people and so many other differences in the world.
So I want to talk about the organization, Little People of America. I touched on a few things during the introduction, but I'd like to hear in your words, what does the organization do?
What does it do?
Yeah, how is it? I mean, it's a support organization, but I mean, you hold events. I don't want to be the one telling everybody that. I want you to tell.
I could answer that. So we advocate for little people. We educate, but in doing so, we are a community. We start out at the national level, which is all of the United States, and then we go down to the state level and to the local level, and we have chapters, regionals, and national, like I said, and we hold events at each level. And so our national event holds about between 2,000 and 3,000 little people every July. We have a national convention, and it's probably one of the most amazing things I've ever been to. I've been to it my whole life. I can't even count how many I've attended at this point, and I still am amazed every single year. It's just such an experience and such an opportunity to be among your peers of all ages. So there's everyone from the age of 99 to newborn, and there's really no other community like this. And I think that makes us all so passionate about it, and what makes us all, um, that's what makes me want to give back because it's given so much to me.
Yeah, I hear those the national conventions are really something. There's
Yeah.
quite a few people that show up to them, and very much a big. And there's a lot of people that are coming for the first time,
Yes.
and that's a pretty amazing experience for those people.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So the website, which I actually just had broadcast, the website for anyone who's interested in going and checking it out is www.lpaonline.org. So lpaonline.org. And that's going to give you all the events and the services that they offer, the support services. And it will also connect people to the more local chapters in their own cities and whatnot. Is that true?
Yes, it will.
Yeah. So, and then there's contact information for the national organization and stuff like that, right?
Yep, absolutely. Anything you need, contact information or referral, you can definitely find there.
So, okay. So, one of the areas that I wanted to bring up is there is a practice known as dwarf tossing. Could you talk about what it is, and does LPA have an official position on it? And just kind of give me what you can about dwarf tossing.
So dwarf tossing is an event that has was held in bars and is exactly what it sounds like. It's where they toss little people. Um, Usually, sometimes it's done in different ways, but sometimes they'll have like bowling pins. Sometimes they have a dartboard, and they see how far they can toss the little person. And it's a very, very dangerous event. But outside of that, there have been instances in which they might have experienced this with at a bar and then left and saw another little person, and that person was thrown unwillingly. And that's what our biggest worry is about this, is that it sets a precedent that that's what you do with us. And so LPA has definitely come out against it. There was a bill that was passed a couple of years ago, or they tried to pass to. Let me stop there. So about 10 years ago, they banned the sport in several states, and then a couple of years ago, someone tried to reverse that ban, and so we came out then with a very strong statement and petition against why that should not be reversed, and won. Actually, we were very successful with that.
Well, it sounds, I mean, to me, unless I'm allowed to have an opinion, and to me, it sounds very degrading and as well, I mean, damaging.
Yeah.
I guess I have heard, I'm reading a book that has a huge, enormous chapter on dwarfism, and apparently there can be some pretty good income from the dwarf tossing events. And I think that's been the argument by some of the little people, is they can actually make a pretty good income from allowing themselves to be tossed.
It is, and I think as an organization, it's hard to argue. We don't want to ever step in and say, well, this is how you should or should not make your money, or I'm not paying their rent, so I understand that. However, when it becomes a community health risk, is when there's a problem. There was a person by the name of Martin Henderson that was tossed outside of a bar against his will, and has incurred a lot of damage because of it.
And this was unwilling. He was just somebody just decided that because he was, smaller and easier to pick up.
Yeah, they had seen it happen before, and they came out of the bar and they had a few beers and thought it would be funny. So they picked him up and threw him.
Yeah, I have to admit, it really does amaze me sometimes what goes through people's head, what
Right.
perceive as okay.
Right.
So, actually, there was another thing that I read in this fabulous book. It's called Far From the Tree by Andrew Solomon.
Yeah, great book.
Yeah, it is so amazing. Unfortunately, I think the Dwarfism chapter is only like the third chapter, and I'm still in it. Very, very big book. But anyway, one of the things that he brought up is one of the dangers of being a little person is sometimes your parents continue to treat you like a child.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that the organization, do you guys give parenting advice, or it doesn't sound like it was an issue for you?
Right. I think there is sometimes that tendency, and I think that's why being involved in any organization is important, because maybe even as a new parent, you don't realize that you're doing it. But when you go and you meet other adult little people, it makes you consciously aware of how you respond, and even not my family, but even people on the street talk to me like I'm a 3-year-old. I can go into a restaurant, I can go into it's all because of my height. It has nothing to do with anything else. They just associate me as a child, and so they talk to me like a child. And so I can usually correct it pretty quickly, talk to them back, and they realize that I'm older than 3. And so, but yeah, I think that's, it happens, and I'm sure people don't intend to. I always try to give people the benefit of the doubt. But again, I'm a big advocate for community.
Do you think that those people really honestly believe that you're that young, or is there just something clicking in their heads that says because this person's shorter, they should be spoken to like a child?
Yeah, I think there's something subconscious in their minds that says 4 foot tall is not an adult. And so maybe they've never talked to another little person before. And so they don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. I never want to assume I'm in someone else's brain because I don't I don't know what's in there.
I know sometimes I have enough trouble in my own brain, let alone. But I also, I mean, me, for example, I have a tendency not to talk down even to kids. So I find it interesting that people just would do that. But again, people are interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
It makes our lives interesting, doesn't it?
yeah.
Things we do and say and yeah. So do people ever in public settings, do they ever comment, like within earshot about your plays or?
Oh yeah. I can't walk down the street without hearing someone say something, point, laugh. The biggest thing these days is picture taking. People think that it's really cool to take pictures on their cell phone and send to their friends and say, "Look what I saw on the street today." However, it's so objectifying, and you take pictures of objects, not people, and without people's permission, it's really it's unacceptable.
Yeah, it's like yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you say that they're treating you more like an object rather than a person. And people just, I don't know what they think, but anyway, I know I've known people or talked to people in wheelchairs, and one of their biggest objections is somebody will just come up and touch their chair,
Mhm.
and that's also for a lot of people very offensive.
Oh, very offensive. I've had the same thing. They'll pat me on my head.
I was going to say, just walk up and
Yeah,
pat your head and like, what? Wait a
yeah,
minute, my personal space here. Go away.
yeah, yep,
People don't do that to me, but boy, I get looks.
yeah.
They assume that I'm stupid or something because my face is different.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of assumptions that people make about people and they have no idea.
So actually, I mean, that pretty much covers the list of questions. I mean, you've been so efficient with your answers that we've just zoomed right through this.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
So if you have anything else to add, I mean, I do have one more point I want you to address, but if you had anything else that, any burning issues that you wanted to bring up, anything else about LPA, I'll come to my final question if you're done.
I can't think of anything.
Well, I hope that means that I did such a brilliant job of asking questions.
Absolutely. I think you did.
Yeah. So, I mean, I try. I know that I mean, what a lot of people may not realize is that, I mean, Leah and I have talked, prior to coming on the air. And of course, we actually had a false start on a webinar a couple of days ago. So this is actually kind of a do-over.
Right.
So, Leah, here is my one final question. And that is, if you had advice for someone who obviously, I mean, you're very confident, you're very comfortable in your own skin. And I know that that's what you want for everyone. I know that's what I want for everyone is to feel comfortable. But there are people who are afraid to go out, who are afraid of the comments and the stares and the touching and all this other stuff, all this inappropriate behavior. So, what kind of advice would you give to the people who are more insecure about their situation?
I think I'm going to go back to two things. One, like I said earlier, pride takes practice, and you'll never get past it until you just practice, fake it until you make it. And if you have to go out and pretend like you're, as a kid, I used to pretend like I was Julia Roberts. I think Julia Roberts' time is probably past there. Maybe the Kardashians are a better example these days, but someone that is on the street that's absolutely beautiful, that, people, they probably receive the same thing, but it's in a different context. So I would say that. And on the opposite side of it, I would say for people to educate themselves about difference so that they are not part of the problem.
Absolutely, that's a fantastic answer. So, Leah, unless you have any final comments, I just want to say, thank you so much for coming on with me. One of the reasons that I approach organizations and look for people to come on the show is it's just a tremendous education, not only for the people who watch the show, but for me as well. And it's just delightful for me to have people like you to come on and to be so open and honest and expressive about your physical difference. Now, obviously, the people who come on are pretty confident, otherwise, they wouldn't be on camera broadcasting themselves around, potentially internationally. So, again, thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed the opportunity and the opportunity to get to know you. Like we said, this was our second time around, but it was more of an opportunity for me to get to hang out with you and get to know you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I have a tendency to, kind of not go away. So hopefully we'll be in touch.
Don't go away. I'll look forward to working with you again in the future.
That sounds good. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up today's show. My next webinar is on October 27th at 12 noon or 3 p.m. Eastern Time. My guest is Colleen Wheatley. She is the Manager of Client and Program Services for About Face, which is a facial difference-based organization based out of Ontario, Canada. However, instead of just discussing facial differences, we're going to be talking about the social construction of discrimination. So while, of course, we're going to talk about facial difference, we're going to have a little bit different twist. And I think that's going to be a pretty awesome thing to do. And I'm going to try to do that more, not just talk about people's differences, but also address very specific things. So I hope that you will join us. Secondly, and I always end my show this way, I encourage everyone to be kind. We talked about that today. Be kind to the people that you encounter. And especially, don't forget to be kind to yourself. So thank you very much for joining me. I'm author and speaker Don Shaw, and I hope that you will tune in to future episodes.
We are love, we are one, we are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace, we are war, we are how we treat each other, nothing more. We are how we treat each other, nothing more. We are how we treat each other.